Right now on the National Weather Desk, severe storms pummeled Texas overnight, bringing flooding and large hail. Caught on camera, dramatic rescues in California following this week's heavy rain and floods. See how people living in the path of the solar eclipse are getting ready for the large crowds. A look at the problems melting snow can cause in your home. We'll show you how lenticular clouds form into their unique shape and why manatees gather in such large numbers when the water starts to get cold.
From our nation's capital, this is the National Weather Desk.
Good morning and welcome to the National Weather Desk. I'm meteorologist Matt Ritter. People living in central Texas likely had a tough time sleeping last night as powerful storms rolled through the region. They brought heavy rain and even thunderstorms to both Austin and San Antonio. This is already San Antonio's fifth wettest January on record. It could be top 2 by the end of the day. The storm also dropped large hail. San Antonio meteorologist Chris Suchan posted these pictures of 2-inch hail on his Facebook page. Austin meteorologist Avery Tomasco looks at this morning's flood concerns.
Over the last 5 days, 2 to 5 inches up and down I-35. Pales in comparison, though, to the remarkable totals, which continue to climb this morning down in Fayette County. Widespread 8 to even 12 inches, already 4 times the normal January rainfall amount. And it continues for about the next 24 hours as a slow-moving upper-level storm system comes in from the west, meeting up with a stalled front, the focal point for the heaviest rain, which is continuing to be southeast of Austin. So here's the lay of the land. Up and down I-35, again, everything's wet, slippery. Please drive carefully, but that is not causing any new flooding issues. That's just some good steady rainfall. This is a problem spot though, Fayette County, where in just since midnight, we've seen 1 to 2 inches pile up. There is more heavy rain filling into that flash flood warning as we speak.
San Diego is still cleaning up after severe flooding earlier this week. We are now seeing some of the dramatic rescues of people caught in the rushing water. The San Diego Fire Department posted this video on their Twitter page. Firefighters rushed to the banks of the San Diego River where a man was trapped in the swift water. The firefighter threw what's known as a save-a-life disc to the man, who was able to grab it. It was one of dozens of rescues across Southern California on Monday. Remarkably, there were no deaths. There was also a dramatic rescue in Northern California. Ryan Curry shows us how a woman was rescued from an overturned pickup in the water.
Airlifted to safety after being stranded all night.
The woman that was involved had been there since 7 o'clock the previous evening.
Alameda County Fire got a call around 10 a.m. Tuesday morning about a woman stranded on top of her car at Del Valle Regional Park. They say she tried to drive over this bridge that is submerged in water. The water moving so fast it took her car off the bridge, flipping it over into the creek nearby. She was stranded with no cell phone to contact anyone. A camper found her and called for help.
He was attempting to cross a cement bridge that had been topped by the heavy rains. So you can just imagine that probably last night the water flow was even more heavier than it was today.
Helicopter became their only option.
It's very deceiving. A lot of people think that it may only be knee-high, waist-high, but when it's traveling at a good clip like that, you got a good amount of pounds per square inch on every portion of your body. If it's enough to move a vehicle, it'd probably take your legs out.
They say the rescued woman had symptoms of hypothermia, but was otherwise okay. She was able to communicate with first responders while they took her to the hospital.
And now the plus side. All that rain is helping California's water supply. The levels in Shasta Lake in Northern California have risen nearly 10 feet in just the past week. The reservoir is now 40 feet higher than it was this time last year. And even though more rain is in the forecast, officials are not worried about too much water, at least not yet. People living in America's most northern towns saw the sun yesterday for the first time in more than 2 months. The northern Alaska town, which was once known as Barrow, sits above the Arctic Circle. The sun set back on November 18th and remained below the horizon for 66 straight days. It's still pretty cold. Today's high there will be 10 degrees below zero. The first full moon of the new year happens tomorrow. The so-called wolf moon peaks just after noon, but it won't be visible until later in the evening. The name comes from the belief that wolves howled more during this time of the year. January's full moon is also known as the hard moon, old moon, and ice moon. Sky watchers should also be able to see Mercury, Venus, and Mars early Friday morning. And speaking of sky shows, we are now just 75 days away from this year's total solar eclipse on April 8th. The eclipse will be visible along a path from Texas all the way to northern Maine.
You are watching the National Weather Desk.
When Arctic air invades, many businesses close their doors for the day, but that's not an option for hotels, especially those servicing ski resorts. Brianna Carroll shows us how Montana hospitality workers are always ready to adjust to Mother Nature.
We are doing everything from shuttling guests to jumping their cars when their batteries don't start to making sure that they get to their locations.
Mike Johnson runs a hotel management company and serves as the president of the state's Tourism Advisory Council. He tells me extreme cold causes copious issues for properties, including burst pipes and water damage, doors frozen shut, and employees who can't make it into work. Combined, he says that makes it a much tougher winter weather challenge for the state's hotels than low snow.
Nobody wants to be on the road. You don't want to fear having a problem on the roads when it's 40 below.
So far this season, he says the weather has been incredibly unpredictable, causing tens of thousands of dollars worth of revenue loss as some properties face bookings that are down as much as 50% compared to last year. For the state's ski towns that do rely on winter tourism, the challenges brought by periods of extreme cold are only exacerbated by low snowfall.
The closer proximity you are to a ski hill in terms of a hotel or hospitality operation, the more impact there's going to be. There are folks that rely just on that piece of seasonal employment that if it's not there, then they don't work.
And as the winter progresses, if snowfall totals don't start to pick up, hospitality operations in those areas of the state will face greater impacts.
It doesn't get that cold in Florida, but last weekend temperatures plunged below 40 degrees in some places, and that sent a record number of manatees to the warm waters of Central Florida's Blue Spring State Park. Emily Gracie spoke to the folks at Manatee Lagoon in West Palm Beach to find out why these animals gather in such large numbers when temperatures plummet.
So they'll be around Florida year-round, but during manatee season, we start to see a lot more of them in our waterways and gathering in warm water refuges such as power plant outflows and warm water springs.
And what do you count as warm water? Like, what's their threshold?
The kind of magic number we say is 68 degrees Fahrenheit. So once the water temperatures drop below 68 degrees Fahrenheit, manatees can no longer survive and be healthy. So they'll start to get sick and get cold stress below that temperature. So once it starts to get into the low 70s around here at Manatee Lagoon, we do start to see quite a few manatees.
So they all gather there. That's a warm spot, I guess.
Yeah, Manatee Lagoon is located right next to the Riviera Beach Clean Energy Center, and it is putting out clean, warm water as part of the power generation process.
So I'm guessing you had a little crowd last week.
Did have about 70 manatees hanging out in our warm water outflow.
Where do they go the rest of the year?
Some of them will stick around South Florida. They don't all travel further north, but many of them will travel along the coast of Florida. Some of them may even go up into the Carolinas. They have been found as far west as Texas and as far north as Massachusetts, but it's really uncommon. Most of them will stick around in the southeast United States.
I grew up going to the Florida Keys, and I remember everybody always like pouring fresh water when they would see the manatees. Is that something you should do? Should you give them fresh water?
But it's really, really important that we do not teach these manatees to come to humans and associate humans with food or water. And if you think about, especially the water, where you were when you were giving them water from that hose, you were probably standing next to a dock or at a marina where there are lots of boats. So we do not want manatees to associate boats, marinas, or people with food and water, or else we can put them in even more harm's way. So we always want wildlife to stay wild.
Like manatees, swans aren't usually found in the ocean. They typically live in ponds, lakes, and bays. So why is a swan swimming in the waters off South Carolina? Emma Parkhouse has details from Myrtle Beach.
A classic surfside beach sunset, colorful skies, waves, and a swan? Executive Director of Myrtle Beach Wildlife Rescue Center, Kimberly Saramelli, says this mute swan has been in the ocean in Surfside for the past 4 days.
Most of our swans here are in retention ponds and neighborhoods. It seems more food is prevalent. They can reach the bottom better.
Mute swans are non-native to North America, but the U.S. Department of Agriculture says the non-migratory waterfowl will make local flights during different seasons. In winter, they'll fly to areas with open water and often gather in large groups. but not this one, at least for right now.
This situation seems a little odd. We have had one in the past that we went out to rescue. He flew out to the ocean, but within 30 minutes, he came right back to the freshwater pond that he came from.
Sarah Melly says she doesn't believe it has any injuries or health issues, but she's planning rescue efforts based off another concern.
Mute swans aren't really used to the high salt content of the ocean, so we worry, especially, it's wintertime. A lot of birds that are natural aquatic birds struggle during the winter to find food sources. So we're starting to worry. He's been in there for a long time, that he's maybe not able to find adequate amount of food.
And as for her theories as to why the swan may be exploring other bodies of water,
we're at the beginning of swans trying to find mates, and maybe he was bullied or harassed in a pond that he was in, so he flew off. Maybe he lost a mate and just flew out there. We're not really sure. It's just odd.
Sarah Melly says if they aren't able to capture the swan, they're planning to let nature run or swim its course to see if it will leave the Atlantic on its own.
A grim outlook for crawfish fans. Despite recent rains, experts say last summer's drought in Louisiana is impacting the supply. Fallon Brown looks at the dry weather's impact and the industry's future.
They're called mud bugs because, well, they live in the mud, burrowing underground during the summer months, emerging during the fall when rain floods the waterways. That didn't happen last year.
During the summer, it is so hot and dry that the ground cracked and the water that was down in those burrows dried up and the crawfish died.
The carryover crawfish that reproduce during the off-season are what crawfishermen should be catching now. But they are small and suffering from the cold.
So even those few crawfish that we have are growing very slowly. They won't be in the traps big enough to catch in a trap until probably the end of March or into April.
Mark Shirley with the LSU Ag Center predicting the catch will increase a bit this spring, but only a small percentage of what we normally see. It might not be enough to make the production costs worthwhile for farmers and fishermen who spent thousands pumping extra water into their ponds.
A lot of that water was evaporating almost as fast as they were putting it in. So farmers were running those pumps when they had water. They will run those pumps maybe 3 times as much or 4 times as much as they'd usually have to pump.
And if the farmers can't make money, neither can the boilers, docks, distributors, and everyone else in the market chain, which means the burden will ultimately be passed on to consumers.
This year, we're not going to see the catch go up all that much, so we'll probably have higher prices on through the rest of the spring on into April and May. So that's just how it is.
Farmers will have to spend a pretty penny to restock their ponds, and the shortage could spill into the 2025 season.
You are watching the National Weather Desk.
When looking at a long-term forecast, things can change pretty often. That's why meteorologist Lindsay Storrs compares weather forecasting to the popular Price is Right game, Plinko.
Forecasting a storm that is many days away, let's say 7 to 10 days away, is a lot like playing the game Plinko. When you've got a storm that's that far out, there are so many possibilities of track and timing that it can take, and each one has a different outcome down here at the bottom. So as you get closer to the storm approaching your area, no longer do you have all of these options of what can happen, but you're able to better narrow it down as to what the result of this storm will be. You're better able to pinpoint the exact track, the exact timing, and the intensity of the storm, so you know how much snow you'll get or rain if it's a storm in the summer. So that's why as you get closer to a storm approaching, a meteorologist can give you more specific details.
We'd love to share your weather content on the air. You can find us on all your favorite social media platforms, including Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Just search the National Weather Desk or scan the QR code on the bottom left corner of your screen. We'll be right back.